Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. One of the first things that we should do when we meditate, or that we can often, it's a skillful thing to do when we meditate, at the very beginning of a meditation is to have like a preliminary theme, sort of like a starting contemplation or a reflection that helps to change gears. So often, say for lay people, life is very busy. You have a family and career, job, house to take care of. Life is complicated. If you have a routine, say where it's 7 at night or something, time to meditate, you sit down, start meditating. It's very easy, I think, to simply have it be like a part of a continuous flow. Not in the kind of flow of mindfulness, but in the sense of a flow of just a sort of run-on activity. And there's a certain attitude that we can bring to our meditation, in fact our whole life, which is very valuable. And it's nothing in the world is encouraging us to do it. This attitude is not something that you see on TV almost ever. It's not something you see in advertising or in magazines. It's something that we really have to consciously turn our mind to, something that we have to turn our attention to. And it's an attitude of a sort of very deep appreciation for the conditions of this existence. In one sense, this existence of ours seems so gratuitous. It's just we don't understand really why it's here, how it's gotten here. And it just seems, we don't, as far as we can tell, we didn't do anything to deserve this. It just seems to have appeared. And it seems to have manifested quite freely. And it's so easy to take this for granted, that every one of us here, if you think about the conditions that went into your existence, it's unbelievable. Like, say, the things that you're attached to, about the things that you can identify with, your body. What was the likelihood that your parents met? It's, if you think about the likelihood of them meeting and falling in love, and the exact conditions that went into you being born are almost astronomically tiny. Not to mention the fact that this had to go on for generations after generation after generation. So to bring attention at the beginning of a meditation, and indeed to think about this sort of attitude as something that it's something that takes effort to cultivate, and it's so easy to forget, and it's not something that requires like profound proliferation or anything like that. It's a continual, it's one object, one thought that you come back to again and again, that this life is an incredible opportunity. And you don't want to let that become a cliche in your head, because it could do that quite easily. It's a thought that is so bright and relevant and valuable. Just because if you can consider this life as an incredible boon, like winning a lottery in such a big way, beyond anything that you can really conceive of, if you can make that real as a perception, it's a very valuable condition for making choices that are good choices in your life, that are more meaningful. Whereas if you allow yourself to be conditioned, say, by the nightly news, where they assume a very low IQ, perhaps, of the average viewer, and or just the things that, just the worldly activities that really very much can treat our life as very we're consumers. I mean, the word consumer, that's what we are. And that's how, I think, to be frank, I think many big businesses want us to be seen, wants us to see ourselves as that. They want us to identify with their brands. We love such and such a brand. Whether we really understand why we love it or not, they just want us to identify with it, and then once they hook us that way, then we're hooked. And it's quite a degrading sort of self-image, actually. We're consumers. Just the word is quite unelevating. Whereas if we think of ourselves as beings with the capacity to make kamma, to make choices that will benefit either ourselves or will benefit others, well, suddenly you go from being a consumer to being somebody who can do something, and it doesn't have to be something great. In fact, the whole mentality that wants to do something great, I feel somewhat untrusting of, at least in myself. And I think if we can just cultivate the sense that any time we take our mind and attend, we kind of rise up with our mind, and we kind of rise up to attend to something which is skillful. We think of something, we reflect in a way that the mind is uplifted, is ennobled, we feel any time that we can use the mind in a noble way, this is helping to nurture this sort of self-identification with something that this sort of appreciation for who we are. We've got this life, and it's so easy to forget that could go at any time. Tragedies befall. Being sometimes, especially when you're on the receiving end of it, just seems like with such callous disregard for why it seems to have happened. And we sometimes can walk into these kind of disasters so naively and unknowingly. And it's also the case that while, for instance, the only life you've ever known, presumably, is this one that you've got, it's very good to reflect. I mean, you could be anybody. You could be anybody else. The person sitting next to you. You could be born in a different country. You could be born to different parents, to an incredibly wealthy parents, to incredibly poor parents. Whenever you see a situation in this world, again, this is something about like using your mind to attend, to actually take notice, to look around, and the way that people live in this world, and the suffering that is so pervasive. Say very strong suffering. It can sometimes hit you. It can hit a person, and then when it comes time to live, you kind of get out, you go to work, you kind of leave to go shopping. Generally, that suffering is kind of way in the background. It's happened in the past, maybe a day or a week, a month, a year, the past, and it may not be apparent, but yet it's something that's in you. It's something that you're carrying around, and other people are as well. And it's easy to think. I mean, I know people who say they're great sense of unhappiness in their life, and they can feel that it's why them. Everybody else seems so happy. Everybody else seems like, and if you kind of point out to them, well, actually, not everybody else is so happy. it's something that they find hard to believe. At least this is my experience. And I think the point is here that we want to. There's a great skill, a great, very beautiful skill to be developed in taking note of where other people are at. Just noticing, not only when other people are suffering, so that, the response is, "Gee, that could be me," but also when other people are very happy, to be able to notice that as well. So this is really countering this tendency to sort of think that, we've got this body, basically to me, it's mine. Yeah, I know I'm going to die, but it's long enough in the future that I don't even have to think about it. So just ignore that for now. And basically just ignore everybody else and let me just get the things that I want out of life. This is incredibly not such an unusual and rare sort of perspective to have. So one ways of summarizing what we're doing in say spiritual life in Buddhist practice is learning how to attend skillfully to life. We attend to things so automatically that basically there's not a first off, there's not a recognition of what causes the suffering in our life. So there's not an awareness, for instance, that greed, because there's this tendency in human beings that, there's the present moment, and whatever's happening now, we give such great importance to, and we just lose perspective. That there's not a recognition that greed actually wants to be greedy. Greed enjoys being greedy, and it wants to be greedy, and it wants to cultivate greed. And that's the general, unchecked. If greed just left but to itself, it's going to connive and figure out ways to get more greedy. And it will channel its power to maximize getting as much as it can. And ill will, without, again, its modus operandi is it really wants to get rid of the object. And it simply wants to it maybe just wants to thwart the object, it wants to cause difficulty for the object, or for the other person. And then in time, it starts to really want to get rid of the object to the other person. And it has this tendency to grow. It's like a flame. And it believes in itself so much. And the bad, unwholesome, unskillful things that get done in the name of, through anger, is it's hard to comprehend. It's just, I remember a teacher in Thailand just talking about how it's like throwing a torch in a grass kind of house, and it can burn down the house. And you just think about relations, and you might sincerely love, say, your partner or your a sibling or something, or your child, even more difficult, your child, and anger has a way of, when anger flares up, you wind up hurting somebody that you love. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that unless we kind of just know this much, that anger and ill will, hatred, has a tendency by its own, unchecked, it tends to grow. It has the tendency to grow. Just to kind of balance the picture here, sometimes when we think about like greed, hatred, and delusion, also, which has the tendency to grow, we're not trying to just develop a negative self-image, like, oh, I'm so greedy, I'm so deluded, I've got so many defilements, and then you just wind up kind of, feeling hopeless. That's just another expression. That's just the defilements themselves, kind of trying to make you not recognize your power in overcoming the defilements. So we want to learn how to attend to things, whether it's internally or externally. So we want to recognize, for instance, we want to recognize the reality of our situation. So where is there greed in our life that's getting manifested? Where is there ill will getting manifested? These are the two easiest to work with, just in the sense that they're the most obvious. And we want to, the Buddha says somebody who, if you had two people and they're both, say, really angry, and one person knows it and the other person doesn't, well, the person who knows that he's really angry is actually, he's in a much better situation. The person who's angry and doesn't know it, kind of in a dire straits here, because it's like he's walking around with a gun in his hand and he doesn't realize it. He could very easily be causing all kinds of harm and pain in others without even knowing it. So mindfulness, part of mindfulness, in mindfulness practice, we want to take stock. Okay, what are the defilements that are in us, on both now, but also as a whole? What do we struggle with? Where are our weak points? And know that, and to take that, to be cognizant of that. And what are the consequences of those actions? Say, if you are selfish at times, or if you are unfair, if you don't kind of take situations and kind of with a sense of not taking sides in situations. You want to be really balanced in our interactions. What are the consequences when we behave that way? It's almost immediately, and in the long run, it's always negative. It's harmful. But then you have to, part of mindfulness is knowing what's the consequence of thinking this way. I mean, if thinking this way just kind of brings you down and you kind of feel bad about yourself, I mean, that's an unskillful state. So you also want to take stock of the good qualities that you have. And in the same way that with when ill will is present and you're with somebody that you sort of don't like, there's a tendency that you just focus on the kind of negativity, the things you don't like, and that's all you focus on, and sometimes it's all you see. You might even believe it, even though that other person may be just full of good qualities. But if you're angry, if you don't like the person for some reason, you just pick out the qualities that you don't like. And that's what negativity does. It just sees the worst. And it often will believe its own thinking on those things. Lust or greed, it just sees the positive. It just sees the beautiful. And everything else it just kind of ignores. Sometimes to absurd, like you can see sometimes people who, they might be ambitious and say, they have this dream that they want to have a certain amount of money, and they're kind of working and wheeling and dealing, trying to make money, and they're making themselves miserable in the process, and it's completely obvious. It's like, well, what are you born for anyways? Are you born just to make money? And but they can't see it like that. All they can see is okay, once I get so much money, then there'll be whatever, freedom, or I can get the car that I want, or the holiday, or whatever. And they just can ignore that. They can ignore all the misery, the kind of grim faces that they have, and the kind of grumpy moods, and the unsociable side effects of all that, simply because they're so focused on this kind of one aspect of greed, the object that they want, and they just focus on the good of it, even though it might be just teeming with negativity, negative side effects. So one thing the Buddha, very lovely quote the Buddha has, although it should be qualified a little bit, but he says, I see no other thing, monks, so conducive to the arousal of wholesome mind states as contentment. Now he also says that about diligence. So it's kind of a curious mix there. But why is contentment so powerful in overcoming unwholesome mind states? Well, if you think of, say, greed or lust, it's at the foundation of greed or lust is discontent. There's a sense that, what you've got now, here and now, your situation, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. You're just discontent, and you want some object to improve your situation. Ill will. It kind of goes without saying how contentment. When there's anger present, it's just a miserable state. You basically, there's some kind of misery that you're attributing to the outside, some outside person or object. And again, with contentment, you just blow that out of the water. You're just nothing. If you're content, if you're deeply content from within, there's this feeling like nothing can ruffle you. You've got everything you need. This is what contentment is like, and it's other people can be, what would you might say to a discontent mind might be very kind of annoying, maybe, or they might be very selfish. They might be taking all the best food, but if you're content, you don't have to kind of respond in such a personal way, and that also enables you to see things in a more realistic perspective as well. Sloth and torpor, the third hindrance. Contentment is not so helpful in overcoming sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor, laziness. This is where contentment should not be mixed up with laziness and just like sloth. Contentment is actually, in this sense, it has a clarity to it that's incompatible with sloth and torpor. And restlessness and doubt, even those qualities there, how often are you doubt something simply out of a habit. If you watch your mind and the doubts that come up, very often it's not about the doubt. Let's say you have a doubt, should I do X or Y? And you really believe it, and you might even kind of dwell on this, you might kind of obsess about it. And actually, it's not about X or Y at all. It's about this hindrance of doubt that has arisen in you, and you're just channeling it. And you're channeling it, you're kind of hanging that doubt on this particular issue. It could have been some other issue, perhaps. If once doubt arises as a hindrance, it'll just find something to start doubting, and then you'll believe this is a really serious thing that I've got to resolve, and then then suddenly it's time for the meal, and you don't think about it. It's the end of it. It's no big deal. So contentment has this way of you not of kind of cutting through this chain of thoughts and habits of the mind that are based on this restless movement that wants to kind of find something else, or kind of find something outside of itself to give it happiness or fulfillment. So meditation, sometimes we sit down and you meditate, and you want to take stock of the things that are really valuable that you have. Just give yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the beginning of a meditation. If you're somebody with, say, strong faith in the triple gem, that's a neat thing to have, because if you have faith in the triple gem, that means you really believe it's valuable. And to possess faith in the triple gem, the Buddha says this is the highest wealth. And I believe that's very much true. What you have in the Buddhist teachings is what strikes me as a very reliable, very trustworthy guide on how to lead the heart to the highest peace. And it's an arduous journey for many of us, and it's not an easy task. But when I read and study the teachings, it just gives me a sense of confidence that this thoroughly makes sense. And then there's something here that I really deeply trust. And it's not at all the fact that, on the contrary, the things like the miracles or the incredible stories that sometimes you see in little corners of the scriptures, that doesn't inspire me, because it's almost like that you could have that in any religion. And I'm left with a sense of, well, I don't know, is that even possible, or what, But what's really inspiring is that it's a sensible teaching. It's a teaching that claims to lead to the freedom of delusion, freedom of suffering, through causal process, relying on sincerity and your own effort, with a very clear path that's laid out, that's basically crystal clear. And that's, to me, that's an incredibly valuable thing. So to take stock of that, it's so easy to forget that, even as a monk. Lay people must think sometimes, I don't know, but maybe lay people think that monks, we must be kind of recollecting this all the time, and hopefully we are, but it's easy to forget. It's easy to just forget that you're wearing the robes of the Tathagata. And it's easy to forget that just one word, just the teaching, just, strive for freedom. That's a valuable 3 words. Whereas the mind, which doesn't think about it, strive for freedom doesn't sound so, who cares, It just sounds like, so what? No, strive for freedom. I mean, that's something you take that into your heart and kind of hold that close to your heart, because that's that's something that should define your life, I'd like to suggest. And so here you're in a situation where you can hear teachings like that. There are 7 billion people on the planet, and a great number of them don't hear teachings like that. And now, so teachings like this, I remember when I heard teachings like this, for instance, and I actually didn't like. Part of me was kind of annoyed by these kinds of teachings, because I used to say to myself, well, everybody who's got faith in anything thinks that they've got something special. It's like you talk to a born-again Christian, and it's like they say, how many people on this planet are born? 7 billion people, and there's only a handful of us that are, really going to heaven. And I used to react very badly to that sort of thought. And so when I heard this kind of teaching, I would associate the two. But to me, it's different. This is a different thing altogether. Again, this is the mind of faith speaking, so I just trust. I don't want to investigate this too much, actually, but to me it makes sense that killing is wrong, that hatred is wrong. It's wrong to hate. This is a sensible thing this is sensible. And it's just so explicit. It's described in so many ways in the Buddhist teachings how killing is wrong, is unhealthy, is unskillful, causes suffering. And the seed of killing is hate. And that seed exists in all of us. And that you should strive to overcome it. To me, there's nothing there that is superstitious. There's nothing there that's an entirely valuable set of reflections, and it's easy to forget. Just bring to mind, for instance, what it feels like to be peaceful in meditation. Nibbana, the Buddha says, is the highest happiness. And at first, when you start hearing Nibbana, highest happiness, what is Nibbana? Okay, it's freedom from birth, is what they say. That doesn't sound so great. You can doubt that. But when you start, say, having experience in meditation, where you're deeply peaceful, the mind is calm, the mind is still, it's bright, you're connected with the body, and the body is just still, and the mind is just calm. There's such a sense of health there that it, if you think, it only makes sense. If this is kind of, the Buddha calls samadhi, or the jhanas, sambodhisukha, so the happiness of enlightenment. Not because the deep samadhi is enlightenment, but because it's got a flavor, which is similar to nibbana, calm, still, peace. And if you don't have that experience, it's kind of easy to think, well, it sounds kind of boring. But it's not boring. It's something where the mind is free, and there's a clarity where you're seeing the body, you're seeing the mind, and there's a sense of mindfulness present. It just feels healthy. So these kind of reflections are fantastic to kind of run over, to just kind of take note of when you begin a meditation. It changes your gears, and it puts you in a state where it's like you're ready to. You feel honored, you feel almost blessed, as it were, or just incredibly fortunate just to have this chance to sit in meditation. You've got the advice, you've got the encouragement, you've got the body, you've got the mind, where sitting meditation is possible. And if you don't cognize it, if you don't recognize it as something that's precious and valuable, then you'll forget that. You'll simply overlook it. And again, this is why, so there's right now it's retreat time, winter retreat, and this is time where the monks and lay people who stay here are focusing very much so on formal practice. And formal practice, a full-on schedule it's not easy. It's kind of like all day, kind of sitting, walking, and trying to keep the mind on themes of Dhamma. And sometimes, lay monks as well, and lay people who kind of take on a full intensive meditation retreat, it can be frustrating sometimes. There's this desire, you want peace, you want the mind to be calm, you want it to be still. And the mind is just like, it's in your face, as it were, for just all day, and you're just so aware of the hindrances, if they're there. Then it can be frustrating, and you shouldn't be too surprised by that. But even if you have experiences just like once a week, or just once in 3 months even, just something where the mind drops into kind of a more profound state, where there's a sense of something which makes you feel, or not feel, but sense how important the mind is, and how the mind is something to be. It's so worthy of being caring for, and looking after, simply because of the great benefits that could come when the mind is calm and still. If you can have that experience just once or twice, just enough to get a sniff of it, that gives you a great sense of. On the one hand, it can even add to the frustration, because then you're trying to get back to it. That's another. Once you have that experience, in one sense, you have to just forget about it. It may never come again. Say that to yourself. But on the other hand, it gives you a sense that that's actually a very valuable state that you've experienced. The mind is more clear. You're seeing the nature of your body and mind with much more sensitivity. So right. So to appreciate, like I said, you get a sense to how valuable the mind is. And then people will respond to that sort of experience differently. Some people, they're not really interested in enlightenment. I mean, that's not why they came to the monastery. They just want to, be in a kind of nice environment, do some meditation, feel a bit of calm, and then go back to the family. And that's fine. That's great. There's a lot of benefit in that. But say for the monastics and for the lay people who are committed, which is a sizable number, especially people that come here, the attitude is different. And the attitude that we try and cultivate, I think it can be summed up by something Ajahn Chah said once. He said to his monks, giving them a bit of a hard time, he says, "Look, did you come here to die?" And that's a challenging question. Did you come here to die? What does that mean? And I think this, if you're going for this all the way, there has to be a willingness to let go of your habits, to let go of the various things that you give importance to that actually aren't that important, that you trust or not, you're just wasting time with, and you know it. You've got to be prepared to let that go, and to sort of set the arrow of your soul, as it were, to set it on freedom, and to give it everything you've got. That's kind of what it takes. And that's not to say, like, once you do that, you may not be able to sustain that all the time. And in fact, but whether you can sustain it or not, whenever you lose it, first off, you have to start with that. You have to start, especially when it comes time to go forth, or when it comes time to take refuge, and you're gonna give yourself to the triple gem. You say, "Look, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to commit myself to this." The attitude is one that I encourage this, or this is to be encouraged. Did you come here to die? This is the most important thing in life, and the benefit is vast and broad, and it's like all good karma. It has knock-on effects beyond anything that you can really understand and see clearly. But with that attitude, you cultivate that attitude. You care for it, and sometimes you lose it. Sometimes you make mistakes, and it's as if you've just forgotten your commitment altogether. And what do you do then? And there's not much you can do. If it's in the past, like all of our reflections around time, it's a thought now. Mistakes are made. And then you've got to recommit yourself to what you recognize as being valuable. One way of looking at, like, did you come here to die? Or you're thinking about death. It's death of time, on one sense. I mean, mindfulness is such a present moment activity. It's almost like you're so interested in the truth of what's going on now. Like, what is going on now? What is this body? And what is the mind? And how does it move? And how does it change? And what does that mean? You've got to, in order to understand this, you've got to open your mind and apply the mind to the present moment. And perceptions of time it's just such a diluting factor. We've got the future. We're thinking about the future. What are we going to do? Should I ordain? Should I not ordain? Should I get a job? Should I go traveling? Should I get married? Should I get divorced? All of this is in the future. And when we think of mindfulness as being dying to the present moment, we've got to really give ourselves completely here and now and open the mind to the body and to the mind. And that's a very kind of uplifting reflection. The sense that you're prepared to basically die. I mean, just look at it that way. You're prepared to die, to give yourself so completely to this. You're just going to give yourself to it. And the result of that is a lot of energy. using contentment. I just touched briefly how contentment is so valuable, and when we sit down and meditate and we start looking at the mind, there's so many different methods and techniques that people use, and I think people have to experiment. So much of it, you have to find out for yourself what works. But just the power of contentment. Very often when we start to meditate, we look at our mind, and the mind is maybe perhaps restless. There can be various hindrances in the mind. And often enough, there's this discontent. We don't want the mind to be the way it is. And we're not quite fully mindful because we're so caught up wanting the mind to be still. So one way of working with that in meditation is when you start, say, to watch the breath, and the breath is coming in and going out, and you're frustrated maybe that the mind isn't as still as you'd like it to be, or as bright. Just say to yourself that you're going to completely accept the mind the way it is. And however the mind is, let there be no craving for it to be different. And this is not because we're condoning, in this instance, say the hindrances, but actually what you'll find often enough, at least I do, and you can experiment with this, is if I can ever say to myself, okay, I won't ask the mind to be any different from exactly what it is. What I find is that the mind will just calm down, and that very much of the energy that was getting channeled into thoughts and the future, that was coming from a judgmental mind which wanted the mind to be different, to be still, to be brighter. So if I just say, look, just completely accept the way the mind is, here and now. It might be restless, it might be thinking a lot, it might be irritated, whatever. Just say to yourself, okay, I'll accept that. I'll kind of accept that. And see what the result will be. And I think often enough you'll find, or at least I find, that the mind becomes stiller. The mind inclines from that state, it moves towards stillness. So I think my mind's actually kind of drying up here. I think I'll just leave this as a few thoughts, something to think about as to techniques or methods, recollections that you can use, especially at the beginning of a meditation. But also just something to kind of bring a sense of, to be reminded of the valuableness, and of the mind, the valuableness of the spiritual path, and the incredibly good fortune that you have being in this society with all its flaws and difficulties. This is a culture which will let you practice the Dhamma, at least on one level. That you're in health, you're in good health, you're in good enough health. And even if the body's in terrible health, well, at least the mind is in good health. And even if the mind is in good health, well, at least you got the teachings. You've come across teachings that are really valuable. And really appreciate that and take that into account as to how blessed and fortunate you are. And take that away and make good use of it. Make good use of it in your practice and in your relationships. So I offer those for some reflections tonight.